25th, the end of the month, during the symposium. Instead of coming here at 4:30, you'll go over there.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the CERIAS Security Seminar. It's my great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Xingming Oh. Dr. Oh is Associate Professor of Computer Science and Peggy and Gary Edward Chair in Engineering at Kansas State University. He received his PhD from Princeton University in 2005. And between 2005 and 2006, he was a postdoc here with Professor Elisa Bertino and me. And today he will talk about security analytics.
Well, thank you very much, Ning-Hui, for the introduction. It's a great pleasure to be back to Purdue, and it's really great to see all of you here. Thank you for coming. And I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about my past about 8.5 years work on understanding how security analysts do their jobs, and how that actually leads us to a new project we're just conducting now on bringing anthropology into cybersecurity. So you may feel this is a little weird, why anthropology has anything to do with security, but if you know security is essentially a human problem, then it's certainly not very surprising. Right? So just give you sort of like a very illustrative illustration on what I've been trying to do over those 8.5 years. So my research focus has been, and is still on, how to help this poor guy. Right? So if you have any chance of managing a computer system, trying to understand what's going on, or diagnose faults, or diagnosing potential breaches, it's a huge challenge. There are so many devices, there are so many sources of information that may be useful for you to understand what's really going on, and you have to put all of this into your head and understand their semantics and find the connections between the events to make a determination. And that's an extreme challenge for a human to do, especially because a lot of tasks are repetitive, mundane, and non-interesting. But at the same time, they're also extremely require a lot of high expertise in both security and system and networking. So it's both boring and interesting. So my research goal at the very beginning was to say, if I can save this guy by actually replacing him by a reasoning system, so that you can just press the button, it can find all the security issues in your system and report them as highly accurate alerts. Now that vision has shifted over the years, and now I think the problem how to make the job more meaningful, more effective. But the human is always going to be part of the system, right? Because if you think about it, defending a network is essentially one human playing a game with the other. So I don't think we can ever reach a stage in the foreseeable future for a computer program to completely do the job, right? So the particular approach I've been trying to take over those years is actually, in some sense, non-traditional, because we really want to make sure our solutions are actually mapping to the real world. So to that end, we adopt an empirical approach in a bottom-up fashion. What that means is we start with incident analysis. We talk to security analysts who handle security incidents to understand what happened, how he found out the breaches, what's the thought process he went through to identify them. And we get hold of data that when we can, to look at the data and see if we can find something useful there. And most important, we want to understand what are the needs of the human analyst. And that's not always obvious. And a lot of my effort has been trying to bridge the gap between what we are good at in the university, like what the theory, mathematical models, with the practical needs of security analysts. And it turns out there's a huge human dimension in this work. And in particular, a lot of times, if you ask an analyst, how do you do your job, they cannot really give you a straight answer right away. It's hard for them to explain the process they take to solve a case. And there's actually a well-known terminology in anthropology to describe that. It's called tacit knowledge. And we all have it. We can all do a lot of things, but we are not always able to clearly articulate how we do it. If I take an example as working with my students, advising to teach my students how to do research. Now, it's not always easy to actually explain to someone how to do research, but somehow I can still teach it. So, what's the deal here? Michael Polanyi, who is a science philosopher, had a saying that we can know more than we can tell. And that's actually the essence of tacit knowledge. So in some sense, a lot of my time is spent on how to convert tacit knowledge into a more explicit form, so you can actually model it and then producing algorithms to help humans solve those issues. So let me give you a concrete example to show why this could be challenging for security. Quite a few years ago when I started this work, I was talking with one of our security analysts on campus network. He is a friend of mine. He is actually a special case for analysts because he's both good at his work and also he loves to explain what he does at his work. And this is not a very usual combination. Most of the time they are so busy they don't even have time to talk to you about it. But he really loves talking to people how he solved the case. So what happened around that time was that one of the days there was a very, very severe networking issue on the campus network. So nobody could go anywhere. It's essentially the whole network grinding down to a halt. So there's a lot of traffic going on, and that definitely raised an alert for the analyst. So what he did was to look at the net flow dump, which I'm sure you all know what that means. I just see who are talking to whom, from the campus network to the outside world. What he found out was some of the servers, I have to say these are actually antivirus servers, they were communicating with some known botnet IP addresses. Right? So why do those servers do those things? That's not clear, but it's highly suspicious. Right? And then what he did was to did a memory dump on one of those servers and see what was really going on. And what he found out was there are some unknown code modules in the operating system that was sort of suspicious. He didn't know why these modules were there. They are not not known modules. And he also found IRC connections between the server and other similar servers on the campus network. So with all of this, he concluded these servers were compromised, powered by the bot, and then he took them offline. So that's what he told us. Now, what we really wanted to know is the why. Right? So this is what he did. But if you ever want to design a method to automate this or help the human to do the job, then we need to know how he moved from one point to the other. But then he didn't really tell us the rationale behind it. So it took us about a couple hours to sort of interrogate him, to dig into his thinking, to let us know why he can move from one place to the other, what's the proper way to model it. And by the way, it took him about 4 or 5 hours to actually reach that conclusion, and we really want to make that pace faster. Sorry about that. So after this long hours of conversation, what we found out is the way to model this is probably something like this. If you think about this upper cloud as a human brain, what is coming at us is those events. Right? You have IDS alerts, you have net flow dump, syslogs, all of those. So what happens is when you see those observable events, you think about them, right? What do they mean? So you actually map those observations to some semantics in your mind, right? And then these little dots are those hypotheses that you start to form about what you see. Now these two are not always, concretely connected. What that means is, one event could have multiple interpretations. You're not always sure whether that's the true interpretation. So there's some shade of uncertainty in that kind of mapping. But then what you can do is, okay, now you have one hypothesis. You can think about what that could mean in terms of what that can lead to or what can cause that. So you have some thinking going on in your head, and that can be hopefully modeled in some way. And then as you think, you are going to need more data to either help you make progress, to confirm the hypothesis or refute it. Right? So this will keep going, and you don't stop unless you're satisfied with your conclusion. A lot of times, what you can draw at the very beginning is very, very shady. It's very uncertain, but you really want to reach a high confidence conclusion at some point. And then you stop, say, oh, based on all the evidence and my thinking, and this is what happened, and here's the evidence. So we want to see how this can be modeled in this way. And that actually corresponds to how the analysts thought. And that's very important for us, because if our model is aligned with the real human workflow, then we'll have a better chance of having our research prototype being actually used by the humans, if this mapping actually exists. So just give you a really, really quick overview on how we model it. We have observations, and this is what you can see, but it's not always telling you what you want to know, which is the hypothesis. But it can give you some clue. Right? So for example, if you have see a anomaly high traffic on the network, well, that could mean somebody is doing something bad on your network. So you can use a predicate like attacker net activity to denote certain meaning that you care about. Even though there are zillions of different types of events you can gather from a network, most cases the hypothesis you care about is probably only like a dozen. They don't have a lot of things you want to think about. You probably think about the machine is compromised or not, or is this a reconnaissance, or this is an exploit, those kind of things. So we can use a few predicates to describe those hypotheses, and we try to map different types of events to those hypotheses. Now, because of the nature of interpreting the events, there's always uncertainty associated with those mapping. And different events will have different weights in terms of how certain you are about those right-hand side. And that's important to capture, because in the reasoning, you need to put those weights together to see how certain we are in the final conclusion. So we have to really have a first cut model. Now, we did not really know what's the best way to model this, because humans didn't really use numbers in our head. Somehow we have a hunch feeling. So we just use a human language that are commonly found in certain data sources, like intrusion detection, signature files. You can use things like possible, likely, certain. Sort of tells you, how important this alert could be. And then we just use that in our rule, right? Without further interpreting it using number. But this will come later. So different rules may have different levels of certainty. These can be captured in this very, very ad hoc way, I would say. And then we also have those brain model, right? We want to capture the thinking process. It's a very tiny part of human thinking, but we want to capture what actually matters for security analysis. Here are a few rules from our internal model which try to capture human reasoning. So we have hypothesis 1, infer hypothesis 2. And this is, again, a logical rule with uncertainty. Right? I can give you a few examples here. So if a machine H1 is compromised by an attacker, then you can derive this machine can be used for further reconnaissance into your network. So you can have a predicate that probe other machine to mean this is using H1 as a vantage point to perform reconnaissance into another machine H2. And then it's only a possibility here, since we don't really know what the attacker's choice is. He or she may choose to do this, or he may not. So it's only a possibility. Right? On the other hand, I guess, how do I disable this? Well, I just connect.
Turn off your wireless?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you. On the other hand, if you have a hypothesis like H1 is used to send an exploit to H2, right? And then we will say likely H2 will be compromised. Well, for the reason that attackers, normally, for good attackers, you don't want to branding something which may not work. You test it beforehand, make sure you set up all the parameters right based on the reconnaissance. So when you send a real exploit, with higher chance, it actually will get the target. So it's likely H2 will be compromised. So these are, in some sense, I'm trying to codify part of the human knowledge used in those analytic work. And then these are all logical rules. And once you have the rules, then you can imagine you can just apply very straightforward logical reasoning, applying the rules on the facts. So we have the facts, for example, the memory dump shows there are IRC connection between those two IP addresses, and then from this fact, we can see the first rule's left-hand side is matched, so you can fire this rule, instantiate the variables with concrete values, and you can derive one more fact, which is the right-hand side of the rule. Now, every fact will also have a certainty tag associated with it, because the rule has a tag of likely. We just put likely here as a tag of the fact. Yes?
So how individualized are these rules? Do the same rules apply across all security admins, or do you have to personalize these rules?
So these rules are actually generic. These rules capture the human knowledge used in analyzing different types of scenarios, and at least that's our objective. So we don't really want to have a different set of rules for a new event, because then that would defeat the purpose of having a system to help you find new attacks. Yeah. And actually, these rules is what we call observation correspondence. It can be defined based on the specific types of events you want to capture. So these are actually event specific, but it's not scenario specific. So if that sort of answers your question.
Specific either.
And not what?
Person specific.
The user can presumably calibrate those rules if one analyst believe it could mean something different, or you could actually change the tags in certain ways. Yeah, I think that's a valid way of using those rules.
Yeah, I mean, in our experience, we find that the degree of paranoia varies across different
Right,
people.
right. And another point is there may be different contextual information that may be relevant in setting those parameters. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah. So now you have those derivations, and they can keep going. We have one new fact. Now you can match this second rule which we have in the system. Now it keeps going, but now we have to take the rules modality and consider we are starting with a likely fact. So even though the rule has certain mode, we can only take the less. So you still have likely in the conclusion. So just do this, mechanically. So you can actually perform this in a deductive database, and then you can actually perform this analysis very efficiently. The shapes of the rule that we use will always have O(n) square complexity of n is the number of different IP addresses in the logs. Okay. Now, normally when you try to prove something or try to do the derivation, if I can derive a fact, that means then that's good enough, because I find an evidential path to this particular hypothesis. However, because of the uncertainty in those facts, you want to know all the structure of possible derivation. So you need an exhaustive proof search. So not just one proof, but all the possible ways to prove this hypothesis. That can also be done in the same complexity as finding a single proof. So that's something we leverage from my past work. And then you have the proof graph, which shows you all the possible ways to prove a hypothesis, and use the graph structure to calculate or to infer how certain hypothesis weights could be. Now, in this example, you have two corroborating evidential paths leading to the same hypothesis. You can strengthen the belief, because I have two independent ways to show me this machine is compromised. So maybe we can strengthen them into certain. Very ad hoc, right? So here is where okay, now is the time for it to sort of reflect what we do. If this really makes sense, then make it really meaningful. We need to make sure, there is a way we can interpret the process of strengthening. What if you have, one likely, one possible, or three possible? There are so many different. You cannot just have these ad hoc rules like this. Now is the time we can look for a probably mathematical model to help us calculate some numerical value that actually will make sense. It may not be exactly what humans does, because humans rarely use numbers when they look at the evidence, but maybe it can reflect what the humans would believe in. That's our next step. that point. So we want to find a mathematical model to maybe say, if we can ascribe a particular numerical value to those tags, PLC, can we design a function that actually combine the evidence in a way so it would be interpretable by a human? Let's say we can have, in this case, we'll be combining two evidence passes, we get a different number, which will be higher confidence level. The question is, what theory do we use? You will think, oh, of course, probability. That's the first answer. Now, we actually did try that. We tried Bayesian approach, Bayesian network, but the results were always non-intuitive for some reason. Right? So then we sort of look at the problem and see, okay, what's the cause of those non-intuitive results, and then what could be another theory to, to interpret those calculations. So the choice of a theory turns out to be Dempster-Shafer theory, which you may have heard about. And this theory, the reason we picked that is because we found it actually is aligned better with the human thinking process, and the results are also more meaningful when we applied that. So DS theory is a non-traditional probability theory, or non-probability theory. It has been used in different types of applications in fusing the evidence or counting expert belief. So the key notion in DS, there are two key notions. One is called belief, the other is called possibility. So we are using the belief notion here. What that means is how much we believe in a fact. And this is slightly different than what is the probability that this event is true if you think about that. For example, we may know there's always a probability that there may be burglary that happened at my home, right? There's always a probability. I don't know that, but then I don't have reason to believe that. My belief is zero because I don't have any evidence to support that. Even the probability is always there. Right? Another example is if I toss a coin with an unbiased, with an unknown bias. So how likely I'll get a head versus a tail? Right? It's not half and half because the bias is not known. So in probability, you really have to pick one. Right? You cannot start any calculation without knowing that prior distribution. But in DS, you can say, I don't know. I have no evidence whatsoever to say whether it's tail or head, so I just say either one. Right? Now, bring back to security, you can say, well, if there's no evidence for attack, I can ascribe my probability measurement to a subset of my hypothesis. So it's either attack or no attack, or unknown. That's the key point for modeling, and we found that to be extremely useful to conduct security analysis, because many times we don't really have the precise probability for every event that we need to calculate the overall probability of something being true or false. So when we don't have the numbers, we can either pick one, which may be inaccurate, we have a garbage in, garbage out problem, or we say we don't know. Right? So we decide we want to use we don't know. Right? If we don't know, we just don't put any judgment on it. So that's sort of the reason. And also, there is a way to combine evidence from multiple sources in DS, and that's exactly matching how the analyst use multiple evidence to support his or her conclusion. Now, the only thing is, in DS, in the classical DS, the combination only works for independent evidential path, but you have a lot of dependency in those evidence that you can get from logs or events. So we have to deal with that. So let me quickly show you how you can set up this DS-based reasoning for the type of problem we were discussing. The first of all, you're actually going to ascribe a numeric value for each level of PLCs. Right? We just pick some number. Right? Eventually, only the ranking is used. We're not going to really interpret what 0.6 means. What matters is 0.6 is higher than 0.1. Right? So we just pick some numbers to give you a numerical ranking for each level of confidence, and then for every alert you see in your system, you can actually ascribe this number to the sensor that actually is created it. The sensor in this case could be just an IDS signature. Different signature will have different ways of detecting a problem if you read their the rule description will tell you it's possible means this or likely means that. So you can use those natural language description to infer those tags and then to tags to the numbers. And then the next step is to set up the reasoning. Okay? So in DS, there's a notion called frames of discernment, and that means you can actually describe a disjoint set of states for a question of concern. So in this case, we have a question of concern of you have an alert. Okay? It's either you trust it or don't trust it. Okay? That means is the sensor doing the job it's supposed to be doing, or is telling me something that's irrelevant. Okay? And then you also have a hypothesis, right? A probe IP1 to IP2. Now the matter of question here is it true or false? Okay? Do you believe that? So now I have two frames of discernment. A process in DS called translation will actually can map one from the other. And it actually will map every element in the source domain of translation to a subset of elements in the destination domain. So since we do have a possible tag here, so we're going to first ascribe the 0.1 weight to trustworthy. So you trust the alert with 0.1 weight, and with 0.9 you don't trust it. And again, these are applied to subset. These are singleton sets. Right? So it's not a single element. And then we're going to see, starting with trustworthy, how that corresponds to your belief in the probe IP1 to IP2. So what we do here is we're going to find what we call compatible elements in the destination domain with the source domain. An alert was fired. If you trust it, then you have to say this hypothesis is true, because that's what the alert is supposed to capture. So trustworthy case is only compatible with the true case in the probe IP1, IP2. On the other hand, if you don't trust the alert, which means maybe what the sensor is actually detecting is the wrong thing, it's not the attack. And then what do we say? Well, we cannot really say the attack is false, because there may be an attack simply because this IDS signature is not doing the right thing. Doesn't mean there's no attack. Right? It may have missed it. It may be detecting, reporting some benign behavior, but the attack may be going on anyway, regardless. Right? So then we say we don't know. So when you don't trust the sensor's result, you just say, now, I don't know if there's this probing happening or not. There still could be one, simply because this particular way of detecting it does not really work. Right? So, and this actually captures the open-endedness of cybersecurity. There are always different ways of doing bad things. We cannot ever be exhaustive about, to say we can definitely assert there's no such thing going on. Right? So we map this to either true or false. And then we do this over the whole proof graph. So for each of them, we'll have this kind of setup, and then we are going to start with each alert's sensor quality metrics, which we use alpha, beta, gamma to represent. And then we're going to translate their metric to the corresponding probability weights to the power set of the hypothesis. And then when you have multiple evidential paths entering into the same hypothesis, you have to combine them. So in DS, there's a way to combine two branches of evidence into a single probability assignment, and that we just applied here. And you have a new value after the combination, and then you keep going. Now at this point, we have a slight problem here, because the three evidential paths actually are not completely independent. As you can see, the left two paths are partially overlapping on two alerts produced by the same signature. So if you don't trust that signature, simply because you have two corroborating evidence, it should not really strengthen your belief, since you're actually double counting that signature in two places. So you have to address this type of partially dependent evidence in the combination process, and there was no a single solution for doing this. People have proposed all kinds of solutions, but we wanted to focus on our problem, and we want to follow the guideline from the one of the inventors of Dempster-Shafer theory. We actually followed Shafer's guideline to handle this non-independent evidential path, but customize it based on our specific problem. So our combination is only applicable to our problem. It's only this type of proof graph, not in generic DS reasoning, but it actually will give you a more meaningful results than assuming everything is independent. So then we did that. And now the next thing is, okay, now we have the theory, let's build a tool to use it and apply it in some actual data and even in the real world. So we built a tool called SnIPS. So what it does is it actually takes snort alerts and give a meaning for each snort signature, and this is only done once. We actually did some simple heuristic algorithm based on the human language description of the snort rule signature to infer their meaning and their weight based on those keywords we can find. And once we have that, we can apply this and the internal model that correlates those hypotheses to the incoming snort alerts. And then I want to ask the question, based on all these alerts that you can get from the network, and based on your reasoning, please tell me, all the possible facts you can derive with the corresponding belief value. And we rank them based on how likely that fact is true or not. And we can output those hypotheses in something like this. And the goal is to see if this can help a human analyst to do their job. If you have ever got luck running a snort on even a small size network, you will see there, if you don't do anything, you probably get hundreds of thousands of alerts every day. So we tried it on our network, our departmental network. We actually got tens of thousands of alerts every day. Most of them are false positive, simply because the rules are very conservative, just would capture a remote possibility of attack in many cases. So we have to do something to help a human to go through this. Now, what do we mean by helping? Well, we want to see, can the ranking provided by our DS belief can really reduce human labor? That's the first thing we want to see. That's the second question we want to ask is it really what we did that makes that happen? Or just happened by some coincidence? Is it really what we did, all this customizing DS theory that really makes that difference? So in order to see that, we need to have data with ground truth. And it's not easy, right? Especially for this type of problem. You want to have logs, alerts, and then you don't know which alerts are really true alerts. And there were probably, I'm aware of 2 data sets that have done this. One is the very well-known Lincoln Lab DARPA data set, which you probably know has a lot of problems there. And there's also a newer one, is an IARPA data set that you can get from Predict. There are many problems for those kind of data because they are generated by some human synthesis process. So the way the data is generated will give you some skewed distribution on the patterns. So if you use the data to train your model, it's not going to be very valid. But we only use it for testing. So that's how we avoid those pitfalls. Now, and we don't really look at the data to develop our model. That's also very important. So we just throw our tool against those data sets. Our tool was developed completely independent of those two, just based on our understanding of human analyst's job, and then based on we're looking at those snort documentation to derive those meanings. And let's see how it works. Right? Now, long term, we want to really use field deployment, but there's some challenges there, which I'm going to talk about later. Right? So one thing I want to look at is, does the ranking provided by our DS calculation really gives you a meaningful prioritization? So if you set the hypothesis or the alerts on certain value, let's say I'm only going to look at alerts that support hypothesis with at least 0.9, and that's my cutoff. Anything below that, I don't care. Then you can actually compute precision recall. Okay? Precision means if you only take that alerts, what's proportion of those alerts that are actually true alerts? If the higher, the better. Right? If all you get is true alert, then you're not wasting humans' time. Right? 1 is the best. Now, if when you move the threshold lower, now I have 1 minus threshold here, so this is actually 1. And you move it lower, you move it on the right part of the x-axis, you want to see a decrease in the precision. So that means the higher threshold gives you more likely you actually see true alerts. If you move to a more lower threshold, you may be wasting more time. And that's a meaningful prioritization. And that's what we see in the Lincoln Lab DARPA data set. Okay. And we did again for the predict IARPA. Now there is a slight anomaly here, but overall the trend is still going down as the cutoff moves from high to low. So that's good news.
What does the green line mean?
So green line is the fraction of total alert that you have to look at if you set that as the threshold. So the precision is the true alerts divided by the total number, the total number of alerts, and that's the fraction of total number of so if you cut the threshold here, you're only looking at about maybe 2% of the overall alerts. So you're saving some effort there. But as you move the threshold lower and lower, you are going to have to process more and more alerts, and then the recall will also grow, which means you actually capture more true attacks, but it's not growing well, in that case, it's actually growing faster than this one. Now, in that case, it's actually growing not as fast as the total effort. So, and then we want to see whether all of this is because we did this complicated computation. Maybe you could just do something simpler, which can get the same prioritization effect. So then what we did is to see, what if you only, let's say, take the standard Dempster-Shafer theory without any customization to deal with the partially dependent evidence, which will give you the standard DS curve, or you can just take the maximum node in any correlation graph and take that as the weight for every alert in that graph. Or just don't do any correlation, just take each single alert's quality metrics as the decision point. Right? How can we compare these different approaches? Well, we compare them by plotting the ROC curve, the receiver operation characteristic curve. So what that means is you have the x-axis being the false positive, and the lower the better, and y is the true positive. That means the percentage of true alert that actually you capture. So 1 is the best. This is the most optimal point, but we can never get there. The closer to this point, the better the system. So then you can see what we did actually move the point closer to the most optimal point. It's actually made a difference. So it's not by chance this actually worked. You do need to do all of this to get a better result. And the same trend you can see in the predict IARPA dataset as well. So these are just some sort of sanity check to see if it can ever have a chance of working at all. If it even doesn't work there, probably we don't even want to bother doing a field deployment. But after this point, also maybe let's see how it can work in a real network, and that's a real test. You throw it into a production system and see whether it can find out true problems. And that's what it did. We deployed at our own departmental network. We had PhD students analyzing the output. You can guess how that works. Right? And then we did have one master student who had some system admin background to help. You need to have those expertise to interpret the result. But still, we have problems, challenges, I would say. It's hard to find true incidents. They are rare. They don't always happen. When you do this experiment, maybe no attacks. So you don't really get a lot of interesting cases. And then most of the things are still, false correlations. But you want to know why that's happened. You have to analyze those outputs to see why that happened. Now, that needs some domain knowledge and more contextual information to really see if that's a false alarm or not. Fortunately, our assistant has already helped us a lot. He didn't have a lot of time, more time to even help us to interpret the results. Because this is not something he actually normally uses at work. So why would he spend time to see yet another tool and try to use that and understand the result, and it may not work afterward, right? So we didn't really get a lot of help in terms of interpreting the result. And we did not have a lot of experience in security analytics, and we don't really have data access like for server logs when it did matter. We cannot log in to get those logs and see what was really going on to confirm that. So all of these were challenges for this research. And we were sort of stuck for a while. And then we think, okay, maybe we should rethink our research strategy. Maybe the first thing that we need to do is to learn how to do security analyst job. Because that's crucial in understanding the output from our tool. And maybe even more important, it's crucial for us to understand what is really needed, what is really missing in the operation. Right? So this job is actually more an art than a science. A lot of hunch feelings, no manuals, there's no formal training for those analysts. They just throw at the job, do it. Right? It's a learning through the pain. So we have to go through the same process in order to get the tacit knowledge embedded in that work environment. Knowledge is not really written down. It's a very new field. People haven't really got around to synthesize the essential processes and skills that are needed for this job. And that's also a challenge in training as well. So then, what can we do? How can we get to the tacit knowledge, in a good way? Right? Well, there's really no better way than being part of the operation. And that has been studied in a different setup by two anthropologists. They only to understand how humans learn. Right? And what Jean Leib did was that she actually went to Liberia for quite a few years, and she spent extended period of time just to study and observe how tailors there learn their jobs. And they can make very nice clothes mimicking what was shown in this Paris fashion show. These are really highly skilled tailors. And then she wanted to see how they actually learn the job. She wanted to see how the apprentice of the tailors actually get to learn how to do the measurement, design, cutting, putting things together. What she found is there was no training at all. The master didn't train the new tailors. They just started working right away, and they first do the finishing work, like just putting on the buttons, getting the final, weaving touches, and then moving gradually towards more advanced skills. And they learn by doing and by observing. Not very surprising, I would say, but the finding after this study plus another study that she did after she returned to US showed that not like what people tend to believe, knowledge and learning is not always explicit. We all learn in some way or the other. We take classes, we sit in the classroom, that's learning, but learning also happens in a subtle way. It's often embedded or even embodied in practice. So you learn stuff by doing it, and you learn it from your peers. So there's a social dimension to knowledge as well. If you are not part of the social organization, you're not going to learn it. Right? And that's actually sort of put me in a sort of very extended thinking to say maybe we'll never have to worry about those the MOOCs will drive the university out of business, because we have to learn by being here. And the social connection is very important factor in learning. So the conclusion from their research is that in order to get the passive knowledge that are embedded in that workplace, you have to become part of that, what they call communities of practice. You have to join that community to be able to extract the tacit knowledge from that. And that's what brought us to our new project on bringing anthropology into cybersecurity. So sort of start from the very, very fundamental question is how analysts do the job in the first place. Can we understand that, and can we model it precisely? We did it through interviewing. We talked to friends who did the job, but then that's probably not going to be enough. Because a lot of the subtleties were hidden in the work themselves. If you are not there, it's hard for you to really get to the core of the knowledge. So what we did, supported by the NSF grant, is to have multiple students embedded in security operations of different types of organizations. So obviously we had our own university security team, which we had a very good working relationship. So we had 3 of the students embedded there working on different aspects of the job. They were just working like an analyst, so like a trainee there. And then we also had one of those 3 students to be embedded. He actually worked at the HP Security Operation Center for 6 months, right, to learn how actually that is done in a commercial setting. And we had one summer intern embedded in Honeywell's SOC for 3 months. And then we're still trying to expand that into more places to see whether we can find recurring patterns or something is unique to the particular company we studied. What we have found out so far was very different from what we thought we were going to find. There are a few points here. The first thing that we found out right away was very simple problems do not have solutions in either commercial off-the-shelf or open source tools. Things like how to map an externally observable IP address to an internal device is an unsolved problem in practice, even though it's trivially solvable by building some log parsing and then database caching to speed up the lookup. Those kind of things were not even there in any of the tools that we have found. People have to do in a very rudimentary way. Took minutes to find this device for single IP. We went in, we got the speed up to only a couple of seconds. So that's something we can really make a huge difference in operation, even though it's not really rocket science. And also we had the problem of, we all had the challenge of getting our research tools used by operation people, because they just don't have time, or they don't have the interest sometimes. Now, once we were there, whatever we built was taken right away by the analysts. There was no hesitance, because they knew what we built was directly embedded in their workflow. They can see from 5 minutes to 2 seconds that saved their time a lot. So it grabs it right away. And the very interesting finding is, when they are going to use our tool, to use it in more ways than we thought it was designed for. That actually opens up more tacit knowledge discovery. Because they'll ask you, oh, you can do this, then maybe if you also add this component, you can also do that. I never knew they needed to do that because they didn't see the tool in the first place. So they cannot think about that will become a useful feature. If you ask them, what do you need, they will not tell you until they see the very, very first prototype. Oh, yeah, then I see you can actually enrich it to achieve this. And that's important because I used to have this case which involved that. So then you know all of that. As this tool-driven knowledge discovery is sort of different than the traditional anthropological notion of tacit to explicit knowledge conversion. So in the classical conversion, you become the apprentice of the people, and you learn the tacit knowledge this way, and then you walk back and think about what you do, and reflect, reconstruct the actions, and then you make that explicit, and that's sort of the end of the story. And you write about them, you publish. But now we're actually going to turn that into models and tools that can feed back into the community, and they are readily accepted by the community, and that drives more tacit knowledge discovery, and then it also helps the people who do the job understand better how to do their job. And that's actually the quote from one of the analysts that we work with. He said, oh, you're really helping us to know better how we do our job, because everything now becomes much more clear once we see how everything works in the tool. So, again, just in summary, I truly believe this anthropological methods are highly relevant to cybersecurity research because we are dealing with humans, but both for defender and then offender. And we can actually benefit by walking down the pedestals of academia and then join the community of practice in certain ways to try to get the tacit knowledge and then convert that into more useful technologies. So I guess with that, I would like to thank you, and if there are any questions I would like to take, if time permits.
Questions?
Do you still have students working as analysts now?
At my university,
Yeah.
there are still a couple students there, and they are just there all the time, and so they have developed certain frameworks that is embedded into their work now. So we're using that as a way to solve more problems for research as well. So it sort of served us well as well. So we actually have data access for whole campus network. We can do a lot of interesting research on that platform.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.